Hi everybody, it's Thomas here from Thomas Fitzgerald Photography, and today I am doing a special video, and it's going to be a Q&A session on Luminar 2018. Now, I've been covering 2018 version of Luminar on my blog for a little while now, since it was announced and since the pre-orders became available, and I've asked people if they have any questions, and I got a good few responses. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through them in no particular order, and just kind of give you demonstrations of some of the things that people are asking about. Now, I didn't actually take the names of the various people who asked the questions, mainly because most people were using handles rather than names. But if you asked a question and I didn't get to it, just leave a note and I will see if I can follow it up as well. So let's dive right in. So the first question that I got was, what can you use as a digital asset manager until the DAM function, so that's digital asset management function of Luminar, comes next year? So if you haven't seen this already, they have pre-announced that they're developing a asset management software to go with this. So it'll be it'll be part of Luminar, and basically that would be like a browser and an organizer and a database for your images, kind of like what Lightroom is now. But that's not going to be available until next year. So people are kind of wondering, how do you work with it now, and what kind of software can you use it with, and what do I recommend? So there's a couple of different options. I am using Lightroom and Bridge at the moment, but you can really use anything. There's no it doesn't really matter. So let me just dive over and show you a few things. So if we switch to Lightroom, for example, there's a couple of different ways of getting your image from Lightroom into Luminar. So if I just go to the grid view and we can see, we'll take an image. So we'll take this image here that I was already on. There are three ways of getting it into Luminar from Lightroom. The most obvious one is you can just drag and drop it onto the dock. So like this, and this will open the image. When you drag and drop it like this, it will do the raw file. There are other two ways, which I shall show you once this opens. Okay, so that's one way you can do it. That's probably not the most intuitive, but let me go back. Let me just close this and we'll try a different way. So if I hit don't save. So the other way is, there's actually two other ways. The first way is you can go export with preset, and what you should see in here is Luminar 2018. Now you'll see two different options here. The first is edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So what that will do is it'll render it using Lightroom and send a TIFF over. So kind of like you normally would with an external editor. And then open source files, this will actually send the raw file. Let's just assume that that's what you want to do and send the raw file. So I just hit open source files. There is a difference when you do this, and this is quite important to note, is because it activates Luminar as a plugin. And when you do that, it will, instead of giving you the save options and the options to export your images, instead you get a button up here that says apply, as you can see up here in the top hand corner of the screen. So when you click on that, it will send your image back to Lightroom. So again, let's just give this a second to load. Okay, and again, let me just apply a preset so that we can see that it's actually done something before I send it back. So if I hit apply up here, let me just show you the other ways you can do this. So the other options are in export with in plugin extras. You can also go, where's it gone? Transfer to Luminar 2018. So what this will do is, again, this will send the raw file. And again, it will link it, so you hit the apply and it'll send it back. And then the final way is, there's one more way. You can go edit in and then Luminar 2018. And when you do it this way, it will just send a TIFF file. So that's kind of handy if you are happy with your Lightroom version and you want to send, you just want to use it as a plugin. That can be useful sometimes. In fact, I use it quite a lot that way, especially if I'm working with non-Fuji files. In fact, that's how I used 2017 mostly, was doing it that way. So I'm just going to quit Lightroom here because I need to restart it. So the other option, or a other option, is to use Bridge, and again, it's really straightforward. There's a couple of different ways you can go about this. You can right click on the file in Bridge and go Open With, and then Luminar 2018. So let's just do that. Okay, so there it is, opened from Bridge. And again, you can do whatever you want, and then save it back out. So again, I'm just going to quickly apply a preset here. And in this case, if I want to save, I can save it as a Luminar format. And I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a second. And then, so if I go save, it will save it as a Luminar format. Which I'm going to talk about a bit more in a second. I'm not going to go into that right now. So I'm just going to cancel that. And then to export, you simply go up here and go export to image, or you can also send it to various different places. And you can actually use a plugin as well. And you can also, if I can find it, you can go open in and you can send it to different applications. You can also use, Apple Photos as well, and it will work as an extension. So if you want to use that as your asset manager, essentially you can use anything really. There's no kind of limitation. All you need to do is something that can read raw files, and you can drag and drop them into it. The only problem is you won't be able to manage the files directly within it, the Luminar files, but that's kind of starts to get a bit complicated. But for generally just managing the images, anything should do. Okay, so on to the next question. Somebody asked what is Luminar like for black and white images. They thought it wasn't great. I actually think it's really good. I use Luminar a lot for black and white. In fact, when we thought that Silverflex Pro was going away, I actually recommended on my blog that people can try Luminar instead, because it's actually pretty good for that. So let me just give you an example. So this is quite a nice image, and I actually originally shot this in Across. So okay, so in this case I'm just going to drag and drop. Okay, so we're here in Luminar now, and this is the setup that I have over here is basically my own setup. I made this, and so this is kind of what I use for general purpose raw, but you can, if you look in here in the workspaces, there is a black and white workspace. However, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to make my own. So we're going to start off with just a raw develop. I'm going to leave all that for the moment, and I'm going to leave all these options, and I'm going to add a black and white conversion. Okay, so straight off that creates a black and white. There's another way to do this, so let me just turn this off for a second, and I can use a black and white LUT. So LUTs are generally in a few different formats. There's .3DL is one, and .cube is another one. So I've downloaded a couple of different ones, and I've tried to make my own, which if I can get it to work properly, I may actually release them at some point. Okay, so these are profiles that I created from my Lightroom presets. So there you go, there's another way of making a black and white. The funny thing about this is it's still technically a color image, so you can kind of get to do funky things with it. For example, I can fade this out. But that's beside the point. So I can still do things like use the boost. I can use the new matte filter. Or I can find it, matte look. And create like a faded black and white effect. And I can do things like add a soft glow to it. So if you want to create like a vintage black and white, the grain tools in this are quite good as well. So there, for example, is kind of a grainy image. If I zoom in there, you can see what the grain looks like, which is actually pretty good. So I'll turn that off. So there it is with it off. And there's with the grain on. And zoom back out. And again, I can turn this off if I want to like a more detailed one, and I can do something like. So if I go back to, I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to turn the LUT mapping off, and I'm going to turn the black and white conversion filter on. And then you've got your typical black and white conversion tools. So I can change the color mask. You can tweak all this, and then you've still got functions within this. So one of the other things I want to show you while I'm here is there's a neat thing that Luminar does is it works internally in 32-bit. So I can do funky things like this. So if I go back here to the raw and I bring up the exposure. Okay, so that's clearly clipping everything. But if I come back down here to this and bring this back in, it's unclipped. So it actually preserves some amount of data. It does preserve some amount of data when you add multiple filters. So it's actually quite clever in that respect. Let me just put that back. There's no need for that. It's not perfect now. You will still lose some depending on how much you're doing to an image. But you can actually do a surprising amount to it without actually destroying anything. Okay, so let me just do a few more things here. I can add, say, what would be nice? Let's just do curves. And again, you can move these around. I like to keep the grain at the last, so I can just do kind of a nice kind of high contrast effect. Okay, so then there's before and there's after. So this is just one example. There's lots of different things you can do in terms of that. I'm just going to save this. I'll call it. So I'm going to save that. And I am. That's interesting. Okay, and I'm not going to bother saving this, so I'm just going to delete that. Okay, so let me just take another image here, and I'll show you another black and white example. So let's just drop this over again. So one of the questions, another question while just as loading that somebody asked me was, well, it was more of a comment that it's actually quite slow to open raw files. Compared to some other software, yeah, it probably is. Compared to the previous version, it's much faster. It's much faster than 2017. I mean, it's like twice as fast or faster. It's not great. It's not, it could be faster still compared to, say, Lightroom opening a file, but Lightroom kind of does lots of tricks. Like it caches everything, so I'm not making excuses. It could still be faster, and certainly when you're using a workflow and if you're opening lots of raw files, it probably will slow you down a bit. It's not a huge deal. Again, it depends on what you're doing. If you were using it to open every single image and you weren't using it with some other software to browse and view your images, then yeah, it could be a problem. Okay, so here we have another image, and I can... So here's a black and white file I created earlier. So that's quite a contrasty look. So let's do a different type of black and white. So let me get rid of this, and I'm going to turn my matte look back on, and I'm going to turn my LUT mapping back on. And I'm going to do... In fact, I'm going to get rid of the curves. In this case, I'll just bring the exposure down and maybe contrast up a bit. So yeah, so there's kind of like a faded black and white look. I mean, there's lots and lots of controls and lots of different ways you could do this. Like using this method, if I was to change the LUT again, so let me try. For example, there's another version. And I can turn that grain down. I could maybe get rid of the soft glow and maybe add something else. So like Orton effect. And again, I'll put this before the grain. Just increase this a bit. So again, you're getting kind of a more dramatic black and white look. And bring up the shadows, say, for example. So there's just another example of a black and white image. in Luminar, and that's pretty much all there is to it. There's a lot you can do in terms of black and white. So that's just kind of scratching the surface of it, and I might do a video about black and white in general, and maybe look at releasing some presets at some point once this is out. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So I hit don't save. So somebody wanted to know about masking individual effects. So let me find another image I can work with. Okay, so let's try something a bit funky here. Okay, so again, let's open another image. Okay, so I'm going to answer 2 questions with this one. So let's add some filters, and well, actually first let me just set one of my presets here. So let's use this one. Okay, so the question was, can you mask individual filters? And yes, you can. It's actually really simple. So if you hover over one, you'll see this little brush tool comes up. So just click on that, and you have different options here. So you've got brush, gradient mask, or gradient mask, and you also have luminosity, which is kind of cool. So let me just brush is fairly obvious, so it's the brush. Let me just do gradient mask. So there we go. So that's now created a gradient mask, and I just hit done. And so, for example, if I bring this up, you'll see it's just affecting the top of the image. Okay. So there's a few other things you can do on individual filters. I'm just totally ruining this image here just for the sake of showing you how this works. So you can also add blend modes to individual filters. So things like overlay, soft light, for example. And then another thing you can do is a luminosity mask. So if I go in here and hit luminosity, what that does is create a mask based on the luminosity channel. So it'll be a mask based on the brightness values in the image. Okay, so there's the luminosity mask, and you can of course brush onto this then as well. Okay. So that's masking, and then the other question was using the clone and stamp tool. So in the old version of Luminar, when you used the clone and stamp tool, it created a new flattened layer on top of everything. So the question was, does it still do that? I think it does. I haven't actually tried it yet, so I'm going to try it now. So if I go in here to tools and clone and stamp, yeah, it does, I'm afraid. I know some people don't like that way of working, and that's fair enough. I can understand that. It's certainly not as good as just doing it in metadata and making it non-destructive. To be honest, I don't use that much. If I'm doing anything like this, I will do it in a different piece of software. Yeah. So the problem with this basically is once you do this and activate it, it creates a flattened layer. So then you've lost your connection to the raw edits, so the raw edits you have below it. So for example, if I go back here and say I turn the contrast right up and maybe turn the shadows down or something like that, when I go back up here to this, it's still stuck with the original layer. So yeah, that's still an issue. Unfortunately, they haven't fixed that or changed it. So I'm afraid that's still the way it works. If there are things that you don't like, just let them know. They're fairly good at taking on board reader feedback. So that's certainly something that I can agree with. That really ideally shouldn't be like that. So, but anyway, that is that question. And let me just see. I'm gonna reset this. Let's just use this for a second. So back to our black and white. You can still apply effects and filters on top of your clone stamp layer, by the way. It's just it is flattened, unfortunately. So yes. So the other question then is, can you save LUTs as part of a preset? And the answer is yes, you can. So I have a few here. So this one I'm using Fodak 400. So you can guess what that's a reference to. I used a LUT for that, and yes, it does save it as part of it saves it as part of the preset. Now the question is, if you then move that preset, does it save the LUT file? I don't actually have an answer for that. I need to email them and find out. But you can save it as part of the preset. Whether you still need access to the LUT file or not, that is a good question, and unfortunately I can't answer that right now. I could of course just move this and see if that will work. I will endeavour to find out and post it in another video, or I will answer it on my blog. Okay, so next one, are the Sidecar files big, and what way does the file format work? So I am going to quit this. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open one I've saved earlier. So just bear with me while I find them. So there's basically two ways of saving files in Luminar. You can save them as a flat file which contains everything, or you can just save the actual information, so kind of like a metadata type file. So I'm going to open a file here, and this is from a Nikon D800. So the whole Mac phone document is 45 megabytes, which is not bad, because that does contain the raw information as well. Let me see, one that I know is a Fuji file, which would be this one, and that's only 18 megabytes, so there is some compression going on here. Forest scene. So this shot here, for example, that's 50 megabytes, and that definitely is a Fuji file. So somebody was asking me in reference to Fuji files. So let me just open this. So when you save it in its own format, what it does is it's kind of like, it's almost like a Photoshop file, but not, because it's not. It does have pixel-based layers, but all the filter information is kept non-destructive. So it's like a hybrid file format. But you can also just save it as just the file format on its own. But anyway, so there's an example of a file. So that saved the actual image file, which was the actual raw data, as well as all the filters that I had applied to it. Okay, I'm just going to open another file here. Okay, so here's the file we had earlier, and let me just apply a preset to it again. Okay, so if I go save. Okay, so let me just save this as a desktop in this folder. So I can call this, just say, gramophone. And like I said, there's two ways to save it. So if you see down here, save original resources to documents, that will include the raw information. So when I do that, it brings it up to 58 megabytes. And I can save history as well, so that will increase it slightly. If I turn this off, it's just saving it's basically similar to a Sidecar file. And it's only 480k. So if you were worried about saving space and not duplicating information, then that's probably the best way to save it. So let's hit save. The only problem is, if you move your raw files, it will lose the connection to them, so then it could become a problem. Okay, so that's that question. Let's just close this and close this. So somebody asked using it in conjunction with X-Transformer. So let me just pop back over here to Bridge, because I have used X-Transformer on all these files, and it's much better than it was with 2017. There's still a few minor issues. The highlight recovery now works much better. However, you just need to not use it at 100%. So I find that 75% is the same as what would be 100% with a raw file. It's just the algorithms are slightly different because of whatever way it's embedding the file. So let me just pick an image. 1 second. Okay, so here it is. This is a DNG file. So again, it comes in exactly as it would be. The advantages of using X-Transformer with Fuji files is that it will bake the transformations in. So if I come up here and bring down the highlights, you can see the highlights are working fine. There's some slight funkiness going on up here. If you go to 100%, you can see that it's just very slight purple fringing. Again, that's partly due to the lens I'm using, but you can roll this back. It will actually recover more this way than it would straight to the raw file. It's just sometimes it gets a bit fake looking. But other than that, there's no problem with it. And if I zoom in, you probably can't make this out in the video, but the quality is pretty good. And that's before any noise reduction or sharpening is applied to this. Which brings me to the next question, and that is, has the sharpening and noise reduction improved since 2017? And the answer to that is absolutely yes, dramatically. So I'm going to bring up the sharpening amount here. You probably can't see this too well in the video, so I'm going to zoom right in on it just so you can see it. And that is the sharpening. So sharpening is much better. The noise reduction, there's no comparison. It's a million times better. The noise reduction method in 2017 was really slow. It applied it as a separate layer using the noiseless, their noiseless app, but that's gone now. It's just normal real-time denoise like everything else, and it's actually really good. So I've applied a bit of denoise there, and it's got rid of most of the noise. Again, there was a fine bit of fine grain there, so if I turn this off, you may be able to see it again. This is hard to make out in the video, but yeah, the quality is much better for the noise reduction. That's pretty much it. A few other comments that people made. Someone pointed out that there's no purple fringing, and I agree, absolutely, that needs to be added. And it's at this day and age, it really is kind of something that is needed. The lens correction options in the default, they're not great. It's a straightforward single slider for distortion correction, and it works sometimes, and other times it's not brilliant, because it applies the same amount of both vertical and horizontal distortion correction, which isn't always the case. And also it's kind of it's a single measurement across the whole frame. It's not actually, what am I trying to say? Some lenses, basically, the distortion is different across the frame, and most lens correction tools can bake this in as a profile, but it doesn't do that. It's just a straightforward distortion slider. It's kind of like what you would get in Photoshop if you weren't using the automatic or the profile based corrections. So again, it's something that I think they should work on for the next version. It needs profile based distortion correction, especially for cameras that includes the lens distortions in the image metadata. I think it's something that they need to work on. So if anyone from Skylum Software is watching this, please consider this for the next version. And that, I think, is it. That was most of the questions that I got. The pre-orders for this are ending, I think, probably by the time this video is published, and then it's out fairly soon. Of course, putting this up on YouTube, you could be watching this at any time, so this may have been well out at this stage. If you have any more questions or comments on Luminar, like I said, just leave them in the comments below, and don't forget to check out my blog, subscribe to this channel, and check us out on Patreon as well. Okay, thanks a million, and thanks for watching.